What's up, lore masters? This is a long-form episode of the Borg, one of many breakdowns that I've done. For the best experience, watch the series from the beginning. It'll be in the top right-hand corner. Trust me, you'll be thanking yourself. Today we're going to be breaking down the episodes Dark Frontier 1 and 2, which has some interesting controversies. Let's just get into it. We'll be starting this conversation out with, well, quite a bit of controversy, as I've stated. That is to say, the discussion will revolve around a Borg probe versus that of an Intrepid-class vessel. Before we get into the battle proper, it behooves me to point out that the Borg and the probe act extremely odd compared to previous interactions we see with them. We know from Best of Both Worlds that the Borg act as one mind, and yet we have a singular Borg here walking along and hitting a ton of buttons to see the Intrepid on a screen, which isn't consistent with how they operate. Again, just peculiar. Previously, in a Starship lore breakdown of a Borg probe I'll include it in the top right now, I specifically stated that an Intrepid-class ship was the match of a probe itself. This is largely due to dialogue in this specific episode, Dark Frontier. However, when rewatching the battle in this episode, which again shows the Borg to be largely ineffective, I do take note that during the battle, Janeway specifically states that we can match your firepower. Not this vessel can match your firepower. And the Borg never note that the firepower can be matched because it's an Intrepid-class vessel. Now, many sources, including Memory Alpha a while back, took this to mean that an Intrepid could take on a Borg probe. Again, it was something that I believed as well, so I'm not putting down those resources. But rewatching the battle after doing my review of Drone, it's as likely, if not more likely, that the upgrades done by the 29th century Borg and other sources is probably why Voyager was now on an even playing field with this Borg vessel. Additionally, it would explain why the Borg probe engaged in the first place, believing that the Intrepid-class vessel would be easily overwhelmed. And generally, we've never seen Borg technology be overcome by that of the Federation. The Federation is more powerful in this era, true, and can do actual damage by this point. We see this at the Battle of Sector 001, but to win one-on-one is still unheard of. Again, I guess you could argue that's why the probes are never sent, but it seems to make more sense that the enhancements of Voyager would be why the Intrepid-class vessel won. Not that it was an Intrepid-class, or that the Intrepid-class is on par with a probe. But I'm really curious. Let me know what your thoughts are. As I said, this is a Borg lore series, so I won't be reviewing the actual episode. I mean, who would call something a Borg lore series that basically just reviews episodes with the Borg in it? That's not actually a Borg lore series, it's just reviewing episodes that have the Borg. So, doesn't make a lot of sense. But even though this is focusing on the Borg Collective, I will take a moment to point out how inept the Voyager crew are. In the scenes after the fight with the probe, the Voyager crew is analyzing Borg technology, and this Borg technology still can run around, and some of it can still assimilate things. None of it is in cryo. None of it is in isolation, so it can't get out. So the Voyager crew are just continuing to be top-notch. Just way to go. However, the actual breakdown for the video starts when the Borg Queen contacts Seven. The Collective is able to access her neural transceiver, and their minds become one. Interestingly, the Queen states that she knows what Seven knows and is aware of the incoming attack on the Borg sphere. This would also mean that she probably now has the information about the nanites that could defeat Species 8472. Though, this is after the peace agreement and the information on the nanites being shared with Species 8472 by Janeway, which probably makes the nanites at this point useless. You know, off topic, it's interesting that Species 8472 wanted to destroy all life, and now they couldn't be stopped. Again, they've probably found a counter to these nanites. However, they decide still not to invade. Huh. Back to the episode at hand, the Queen advises that she is aware of the attack, as I've stated, and offers to let Voyager go if Seven gives herself up. Curiously, even with this offer, Seven continues to go along with Voyager's plan. She doesn't warn them. You think she would advise them and let them know so that they could counter this, or at least not even do the plan so no one gets hurt, but whatever. The crew discusses hiding from the Borg by utilizing a biodampener which had been created by Seven's parents. I've discussed the Voyager crew using this outdated technology in the past, the fact that the Borg are aware of it, and honestly, there were some interesting theories brought up in the comments about these devices. We know that once assimilated, all of the knowledge of the individual becomes the knowledge of the collective. The collective would naturally know about the dampeners, which makes its usage sketchy at best. But a more interesting piece of this topic is the discussion on the Borg utilizing the dampeners themselves. In Best of Both Worlds, we know that the Enterprise D could not detect any individual Borg. Hell, for most of the TNG series, this stays true. What if the Borg assimilated the biodampener and utilized it on their ships? This would then bring everything more into a cohesive understanding. Starfleet would ultimately figure out how to bypass the technology, but it does seem like something the Borg would do to hide their numbers. What do you guys think? Ultimately, Voyager would enact its plan to steal a transwarp coil and do this by attempting to bait the Borg with a shuttle. The thought is to entice the collective to capture the shuttle to assimilate it. This would require the Borg to lower their shields. Again, we see an inefficiency where the Borg are looking at consoles, but ultimately they take the bait. I might be wrong, but this seems like the first time we hear the Borg having shields, at least in Voyager. Again, I think I might be wrong in that, but it is at least most important for the Voyager series in this episode. You see, this is a substantial change because the Borg didn't generally utilize shields. When first encountered, they utilized subspace fields that were much more powerful. Shields can ultimately be beaten down. The fields would adapt and make any other attempts at an attack useless. Now, if I were to theorize why this happened, I would say that it's probably due to the war with Species 8472. The subspace fields would be unable to adapt, and the Borg began utilizing shields, which gave a modicum of protection. Just a thought. Once captured, the interaction between the Borg Queen and 7 of 9 is very telling of the collective at this point. The Queen, while observing 7, states that 7 has been quote-unquote remade in the image of humanity, that she's been disassembled and given back things such as her hair. She then states that 7 is still hers. There's two things to this. First, that the Borg believe that the natural state is to be Borg. That in and of itself is something very interesting, something I'd love to delve more into. The other piece is that this dialogue is crazy frustrating, because on the face of it, it would seem to prove that the collective has a leader, and that leader is the Queen. But many will try to say that the collective is simply talking through an avatar. Except we only ever see them talk as one cohesive unit. Until Locutus, of course, at which point they did have a single entity. Then 7 of 9 was to be similar to Locutus, and now we have the Queen. The problem is the Queen has always been there, even before Locutus, as we see in First Contact. So why wasn't she always utilized as an avatar? Why did the Borg think Locutus, or even 7, were worthy when she could have done the job? The Queen honestly seems to be able to effectively communicate with humans, and if you think her safety was a concern, why do you think in such three-dimensional ways? They say that Locutus and 7 of 9 are needed to understand humanity, but again, the Queen seems to do this just fine. The fact that they utilize Locutus and 7 of 9 doesn't appear to do them any favors either. It's just that the Queen causes more problems than she solves, which is to say she solves no problems at all. I am really not the hugest fan of her introduction, if I'm being honest. I will say one thing about Dark Frontier though. It does clear up a huge plot hole that a lot of people have brought up. In the Next Generation, we know that the Borg will go to any length to recover their own. So why didn't they come after 7? The answer is found when it's discovered that she was allowed to be captured. The Borg knew they would still be able to catch up to Voyager. So allowing her to stay with Voyager to gain information on humanity and regain her own individualism might have been something they decided to do that it would be worthwhile. With 7's experiences, the collective, or more likely the Queen, chooses not to make her a drone now that she is back, though she is modified to make her more efficient. The collective, or again the Queen, wish for her to stay an individual so that they can better assimilate Earth, stating that she was the only Borg to ever regain her individuality. So basically, 7 of 9 would become the messiah of the Borg, at least for Earth. Like Locutus, but way more attractive to most people. As a part of this long game that the Borg collective is playing, 7 of 9 is taken to the assimilation of another species. During this time, the species is able to utilize their phasers to bypass the Borg's shields. The Queen asks 7 of 9 what they need to do or their ships will be destroyed. 7 of 9 is resistant at first, but then gives a tech answer. The Queen's response? I was thinking the same thing. Think about that. I was thinking the same thing. Not we, not the collective, not the Borg. I. Again, this is frustrating because more and more the Queen appears to be some autonomous entity within the Borg, but then there are times when she is not. It's just simply not true. Regardless, ultimately the tech change is successful and they are able to conquer the species. During the assimilation process, Seven encounters individuals of the species while they are being assimilated. I'll take a moment to say this. The music is not conducive to the mood, but the screams of the people as they are being assimilated and seeing docile beings walking with the Borg for final assimilation is very scary. It's filmed very well and would have had a major impact if not for some better choices, again with the music. After the assimilation of most of the species, Seven would be indignant that over 300,000 people were assimilated. She would be countered by the Queen, who states that Seven can feel their distinctiveness being added to the Borg, that this species wasn't just 300,000 anymore, but their essence, everything that was good in them, was now being added to billions upon billions. Look, I'm not justifying the Borg, nor am I a fan of what they do, but there is a certain quality to that this species, is now known across the Delta Quadrant, and they have made the lives of far more than they can count better. When Seven speaks of the species' individuality being stripped, the Queen points out that there is no we or me anymore. There is only quote-unquote us. One mind, one voice. Which is counter to earlier parts of the episode with the Queen using I, but whatever. During the conversation, the Queen realizes that 4 life forms on a beaten ship have been able to escape. She asks if the Borg Collective should assimilate the ship or if it should be destroyed. Seven suggests that they let them go. Of course, this is after her having been the person to help them escape in the first place, and telling them how they could escape. Seven argues that it would be inefficient to either stop the ship or to destroy it. And after all, it's only 4 individuals. The Queen argues that if the ship is allowed to escape, the species would continue to resist them. This type of paranoia is kind of interesting to me. It's also counter to everything we see in TNG. The Borg don't assimilate everything in sight because they fear reprisal. They do it to make everyone's life better. This doesn't make a lot of sense. The only reasonable reason to give this type of response here would be to somehow trick or confuse Seven, but to what purpose? Why would the Queen lie here? The Queen moves to assimilate them, and Seven begs for their lives. Seven even uses the word please. The Queen allows the species to survive, and Seven looks shocked, stating that the Borg never had compassion. The Queen just walks off. That's something that we're going to have to delve into a little deeper in the next episode. Ultimately, the story of Dark Frontier isn't uninteresting. It's extremely intriguing. I just hate that they decided to utilize the Borg. I think it might have been better if perhaps instead of the Borg, they made it an offshoot of the Borg or another species altogether. Perhaps making the season about this powerful species that was similar to the Borg but never seen until this episode. And then you have Seven being captured. I mean, I'm not sure, but it just doesn't feel like the Borg act appropriately here. But what are your thoughts? Did it gut the Borg or add to their mythos? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to rate and subscribe, and as always, guys, all of our lives are just a story. Make yours a good one.